Hello everyone. In this video we're going to look at code pipeline basics. So let's get to it. So I'm on the main screen for the AWS Management Console, and what I'm going to do is type in code pipeline and select that. So with code pipeline, essentially what you're building is exactly what it says, a pipeline. And our pipeline will be pretty simple to start off with. We're just going to have two steps to it. The first step will be getting the source code from GitHub, and the second step will be actually building it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is click this create pipeline bit, and now I'm going to give it a name, which I'm going to call Angular DevOps Production Pipeline, just like so. Now for code pipeline, we need to create a new service role. That's pretty standard. I'm going to leave that selected. I could choose an existing role if I already have one set up, but I don't, so I'm just going to leave it selected as new service role. The name of the role is that right there. I'm just going to leave that. This checkbox allows AWS CodePipeline to create service role. That's what we want it to do. Now in terms of artifacts, I'm going to basically let CodePipeline store the artifacts in an S3 bucket for me. So what this will do when I click default location is that it will set up the ability to create a bucket with a certain name, and it will specify all the permissions on the role to access that bucket and put the artifacts inside of it. Okay, so we're going to leave everything as defaulted for the moment. We could choose custom location, which means we're choosing where we want the artifacts to go, but I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm going to keep it nice and simple. So I'm going to click next. Now the source provider, obviously we're going to be using GitHub. This is all very similar to what we've seen in the code build section. I'll click to connect to GitHub here. So this should take just a few moments. And now we've successfully configured the action with the provider. The repository I'm obviously going to use is Angular DevOps. And the branch I'm going to use is phase 2. You guys will probably be using phase 1. Don't worry why I'm using phase 2. That's just so I'm not overriding phase 1, essentially. I'm going to leave GitHub webhooks turned on. So that will mean that as soon as I do a push, it will pick up the change and instantly start the pipeline off, right? We can either do that or we can poll for it. Obviously the recommend is to use webhooks, so that's what we're going to do here. Going to click next. Now we need to specify what we're going to build, so what we're going to use to build this. There's obviously a number of options. We can use Jenkins or Solano CI, whatever that is. I've never really used it before. In our case, we're going to use the AWS code build that we've already created. And the project we're going to use is the one that we've already got. Okay, we could create a new project if we really wanted to. It doesn't really matter. Now this error, I've seen this earlier today. I don't think it's really affecting what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm just going to ignore it and click next. Now for deploy, we do have a number of deployment options. You can use one of these to do a deploy, but because our code build project already does the deploy for us, we don't need to worry about that. So we're just going to click skip. Once we click skip, it's going to ask us if we want to do that, i.e. you don't want to deploy anywhere. Well, we are deploying. We're deploying using our code build instance. So I'm going to click skip. Now this is just a review screen telling us what's going on, but we'll revisit some of this when we get to the next page. And so I'm going to click create pipeline. And this will take a few moments. And now we've got this pipeline screen. So CodePipeline works with stages. So we can create one or many stages. The minimum number of stages that you actually need is 2. So you always need a source stage, and then you obviously need a stage where you do something with the source. Okay, in our case, we're just doing a build, right? Our build happens to do a deploy. As you can see at the moment, source is kind of in progress. So it's got this blue line on the left. It's got a spinner. We can see the text here says in progress. If I click on this little eye symbol, it's going to tell us a little bit more about what's going on here. This output artifact that we're generating, this is basically the name of the folder where the output of the GitHub source will go into that special bucket that CodePipeline will create. It tells us which branch we're working off, tells us the owner of the repository that we're using. So that's my repository, obviously. We're not polling for changes, we're using webhooks, and the repo we're accessing is the Angular DevOps repo. So that's that info. As you can see, the source succeeded. It tells us what the current git command is. If I click on this, it's going to take me off to GitHub to show me what that change is. And you can see there's the change that we made earlier in the previous video. All right. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to come back to the code pipeline, and we're going to explore this a little bit more. But let's have a look at the code build information down here, this little eye symbol. And it just tells us that the input artifact is the source artifact, and the output artifact is a build artifact. The project that we're using is Angular DevOps 2. So this source artifact, it should be the output artifact of the previous stage. So if I now come back to the little icon here for the source, you can see the output artifact is source artifact. So the output of this one is the input of this one. All right. So what will be contained inside this source artifact, you say? Well, it should be our Angular code. Okay, our full Angular source code. Now, build is currently in progress. I'm just going to ignore this for the moment, and I'm going to come up to the edit button because I want to show you more on what code build is capable of doing. So I click edit, and that will create basically what looks to be the same screen but in edit mode. So we can come over to this section, which is known as a stage, and click edit stage, and we can add this action group. Now this action group can be a number of different things. We've got the ability to have a manual approval step in our build pipeline. We've got our build area. We've got those three options. We've got the deploy area where we can use one of these services to do a deploy. We've got the ability to invoke Lambda functions. Now, if you don't know what a Lambda function is, it's essentially a serverless, kind of like a container that executes a small chunk of code. So you can wire those up into your pipeline as well. We obviously choose another source. I'm not sure why you would ever do that. We've got a number of test frameworks that you can run in our pipeline, but these are basically all the actions that we can do in CodePipeline. And so you choose one of these, and then you would set the action name, okay? I'm not going to be doing that here because we're keeping our pipeline very simple. So I'm just going to click cancel, but I just wanted to show you how that looked. You can also add actions in parallel. So what we're looking at there was an action group that would be executed before we got the source, right? And this one here would create an action group that would be executed after we got the source, but within the same edit source stage, right? If I click on this action part here and we choose something in this list, what would happen is that action would fire at exactly the same time as this action here, which is getting source code from GitHub, right? So you can run actions in parallel, you can run them sequentially, right? You can run them across stages, right? We can add stages in the middle of these two things or at the end of the last one, right? We can't really do anything before source because that's the first one. So if I click on add stage, we can create a stage here and just say, I don't know, manual approve for build, say. We do that. And we've got to basically not use spaces here. I've made a simple mistake. and click add stage. And we've got this new stage. I can come in and click action group. I can go manual approval, and we'll just say manual approval. And basically what would happen is if we wanted to, we could set up SNS. I can click save and just ignore that. And basically what will happen is we'll do our sourcing, and then we have to do a manual approval. And then once the manual approval occurs, then the build would occur. Okay, so let's quickly see that in action. So if I click save now and click save again, and we've got an error. What's the error here? Manual approval, satisfy constraint, member must satisfy regular expression, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the action name obviously is incorrect. Surprised it didn't tell me that beforehand. And now it works. So what we can do now is we can run this build again by clicking this release change and click release. And what that will do is we'll now run the source again. So this will transition to the manual approve for build step. All right, so let's see that. I'm just going to pause the video for the moment, and I'll get back to it once the source is done. So the source is now complete, and as you can see now, we have a manual approve for build. When I click on review here, if I come to this, I can either reject or approve the build. If I click reject, it's going to basically end the pipeline and not continue with the build. But if I choose approve, it's going to continue and move on with the build. So now what I'm going to do is just say, I like it. Let's deploy this. Whoops. Let's deploy this. All right. That'll do. So now it's been approved. So in a moment, it should move on to the build step. And there it goes. So the build's now going. We know that this works. I really don't have to wait for that. The other thing you can do here is say we don't want to use the manual approve anymore. We kind of still want it at times, just in case, you know, we feel like we're about to deliver some sensitive code that may need to be manually checked. We can leave this in here, but we don't want it running all the time. So we can click disable transition and say, we'll keep this just in case, right? And click disable. And what happened here? Must satisfy the expression, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so once again, I think I've about to disable. Explain why you're disabling string. I honestly thought it would be fine. So I'm just going to put keep for later. Click disable. And now we can see that it's been disabled, right? So I'm just going to remove all these alerts at the top here because they kind of get in the way. So this transition's been disabled. Now, will it continue on to the build? Well, it should. I'm going to actually come down here and I'm going to stop this build. So to do that, I'm just trying to remember where it is. I think all we need to do is go to details and stop build and go stop. So I've stopped the code build instance. I'm just going to click back to go back to the pipeline. And it hasn't quite picked it up yet. This UI is a little bit slow, but the build has in fact stopped. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click release change, and this will kick off another pipeline. So there you go. The source is being fetched. So once again, we'll wait for the source to get its stuff before moving on. So the source is completed. And did it go to the build step? The answer is It didn't. It looks like it should, but it doesn't. All right. This error is from the previous build that we stopped, so that's why it's in red. We stopped the build, which in that case, code build considers an error. Okay. So I have to come back now and enable this transition if we want to continue through the pipeline. Once I do that, you'll see instantly that we can now approve. All right. Now, it hasn't given me the ability to review yet, but now it has. I'm just going to click approve straight away. In fact, I have to write another comment. Good. Click approve. And now it will go through to build. Okay, so now the build is started, and essentially we're going through the rest of the pipeline. Now, I'm not going to watch this build finish because simply we know it's probably going to work, okay? So a few other things just to note while we're here. We've got the ability to view the current revisions for the build or the pipeline we're about to run. So we can see here we've just got the one revision, which is we're updating that build spec file, right? So once again, if I click on that, it's going to take me to GitHub and show me the diff. This execution ID is basically an identifier of the run of the pipeline. This will be more important later on when we look at things like CloudWatch and setting up events and things like that. We can basically use this execution ID to send an email to someone to say, this execution of the pipeline failed, worked, whatever, okay? So I'm just going to click done here for the moment. It's the same in all three phases, right? The only thing that I will keep in mind with it is when you click view current revision, if this build is working on a different commit to the one that's currently being processed up here, it will show different revision information. This can happen at times where two commits go through the pipeline very quickly. So one might be in the process of building while another one starts gathering the source. Now how it works is that if this one's still building, right, the others will wait and be queued until this one has finished building, all right? So it's not going to build in parallel. It's going to wait and queue up, okay? The other thing that I want to show now, which is not a pipeline screen thing, but it's more of an S3 bucket thing, is the artifacts. So if I come to services, I'm going to open up S3 in a new tab. And when I come to S3, we're going to see a new bucket here called CodePipeline dash the name of your region dash some, I think that's the pipeline number. I can't quite remember. But if I click into here, we've got the Angular DevOps production, blah, 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 the name of the pipeline. I click on that. The source artifacts that we have here, basically the GitHub source, and we have what's referred to as a zip file, and this zip file contains all the source code from your GitHub repository. Now, I'm not going to open it just simply because it's redundant, but it is all encrypted by default and things like that. If I was to download this, you would get all the source code that's in GitHub for that particular run, okay? So keep in mind, this, I believe, is the name of the pipeline, I believe. I'm just trying to remember, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So that's the source artifacts. So coming back to the tools, one other thing I want to do quickly here is, firstly, I want to get rid of the manual step. Obviously, we don't want that. We want to be able to automatically deploy every time. So I'm going to come here, click edit and go delete, and delete the manual approval step. That was just to show how you can add a stage. I'm going to click on the code build here. You got this little edit icon here. I click edit, and we've got input artifacts. I'm going to keep that because that comes from the source step. I'm not going to have an output artifact because I don't need one. So I'm going to remove that and then click save. And I'm pretty much happy with this. This is a two-step pipeline that gets source from GitHub and then builds it using our code build project. Okay, so that's the basics of CodePipeline. I know this is a long video, but there was a lot to cover. In the next video, we're going to take everything that we've learned so far and we're going to automate it using CloudFormation. So I'll see you in the next video.